Welcome into Table Talk. I'm Brian Kell. Isaiah 117's mission is to provide physical and emotional support in a safe and loving home for children awaiting foster care placement. And we're here to learn more about Isaiah 117 and a future project that could be taking place in 2020 with Susan Johnson, who joins us at this table for the very first time. Susan, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, when a coworker of mine told me about this a few weeks ago, I thought we need to bring you on to talk more about this and inform our viewers out there. So let's talk about what exactly is Isaiah 117.
Isaiah 117 provides care for children who are awaiting foster placement. So currently, when children are removed by the Department of Children's Services, there's a transitional period that most people are not aware of, which can be anywhere from hours to days. However, in Grundy County, we do not have a Department of Children's Services. So sometimes our children are taken behind where the judge sits in a conference room. Sometimes they're taken to our county jail, and then sometimes they're driven off the mountain to Franklin County if they know it's going to be a while to place them. The children's service workers, they're with them the entire time. But the point is that none of those three places are where a child should be on the most traumatic day of their life. And when I said hours to days, those children are sleeping at the Department of Children's Services in either a conference room or the office cubicle area. They pull out cots and then they take shifts with those children. The longest stay was 6 days for a little girl. And that's just no place a child should be. That child is sitting there and they have lost their home, their family, if they're school age, probably their school, and most, if not all, of their belongings. They're typically allowed a Walmart sack or a black trash bag with their belongings. So the message we send to that child is, you're the one in trouble and you've done something wrong. And that's not the message we want our kids to have. We want them to know that this is no fault of their own. I always get emotional because it's heartbreaking when you can see those children sitting there. I work with children every day, and it's heartbreaking to think that's the message they're getting. And they're also hearing all the calls made. So when that caseworker has to make those calls to find foster placement, they hear those. Oh, you can't take them. Okay, yeah, I understand it's a lot to ask. Yeah, we'll call you next time. So that child hears all of those calls.
So you all, besides kind of a place for safe and friendly, volunteers that can work with those folks, clean clothes, so important, I guess, smiles. I like what you got in here, toys, snuggly blankets, just trying to create a sense in a chaotic situation, a safe place, right?
That is. So instead of that child being taken to the Department of Children's Services, that's what we're working toward, is getting an Isaiah 117 house. And if we have that, the caseworker will take the child to the Isaiah 117 house. Volunteers are there to be that extra set of hands to help meet the needs of that child. So the caseworker can actually focus on placing that child. So there's a fully stocked bathroom. If that child needs a bath, if they need clean clothes, then they can get that. If it's supper time or lunchtime, they can get a meal cooked. If they just want to go outside and play with bubbles or sidewalk chalk, then that's what they get to do. They get to be a child on probably their most adult day. It's set up with a boys' room and a girls' room. So if they're tired, if it's bedtime, they can go to bed. Whatever their needs are. If it's a teenager and they want to play video games, it's actually set up with video games. There's an office there, so the caseworker can actually work from the office, and there's cameras set up so they can still keep their eyes on the volunteer and the child the entire time, because DCS is still their supervision. But that way that child will not have to hear those calls being made and possibly those rejections. And when you mentioned snuggly blankets, that is one thing that we've already started a drive for, that we're going to have blankets. So every child that leaves the Isaiah 117 house at Coffee, Franklin, and Grundy, they're going to leave with their own little blanket that they get to pick out.
Yeah, and folks may have heard that real quick. This is a Coffee, Franklin, and Grundy initiative, I guess, but the placement of the potential future house would be in Pelham. So give us a little bit of an update on kind of maybe where that's heading as far as the physical house that would be there, or the facility, I guess, best way.
And that's one thing. Pelham DCS decides where the location is going to be. They approve everything. If we find a home, they come in and they tell us how it needs to be renovated, because that open floor concept is very important for supervision. So far we had to meet with DCS, and they approved that they wanted us and needed us, and they approved Pelham as the location, because that is central for all three counties. We did actually have property donated, but the soil sample came back and said it was not suitable for a septic system. So we're kind of back to looking. So if somebody's listening, they've got property in Pelham or a house and they want to donate or sell to us, I would love for them to reach out so that we can kind of get that going.
So, and once again, we're talking with Susan Johnson from the Isaiah 117 house is probably the easiest thing for me to be able to say on that right there. But tell us tell us a little bit about you and how you found out about this organization.
Well, I work for a group called Discover Together, and they're a partnership with Yale Child Study Center, Scholastic, Swanee, and in the community of Grundy County. So we do a family co-op, birth to 5. We work with disconnected youth, chronic absenteeism, several different things under Discover Together. And every year in March, we go to the Child Advocacy Days in Nashville. And this year when I was there, I got to hear Rhonda Paulson speak, who's the founder and executive director of Isaiah 117 House in Carter County. And that in Carter County, it started a little over a year ago. So this is a whole new idea in Tennessee, and even they've checked even surrounding areas. Nothing like this exists. So I happened to hear her talk, and the whole time she was telling what happened when a child was removed, I really couldn't believe it. I thought, this does not happen where I live. Just does not. I've worked with kids for 17 years and did not realize what happened when they were removed. I'm ashamed to say I never asked. So I immediately, 2 days later, was in truancy court, and I went up to DCS and said, does this really happen? When children get removed, are they taken to an office? And she said, yeah, I just had one last night till 11 o'clock. And so I kept hearing Rhonda. She is inspirational to listen to. And she talked about they consider this a ministry. She felt like God was calling her to do this, that, she could hear him saying, these are my children and they've done nothing wrong. These are my children and they deserve better.
Yeah.
So I would hear her. Every time I would think, I don't know about this. I don't know if we can do this. And I would hear her voice. And when I brought it up at a meeting, we had a lot of DCS in the room and a lot of providers. And I said, I think we should try to get one of these for our county. And that's when they reminded me, you do realize you don't have a Department of Children's Services. We have a Department of Human Services. So a lot of times, most people in our county, we think that is combined, and it's not. So when they started telling me that children stayed there, and I said, can you explain to me, I can't wrap my mind around how a child can sleep in an office. And when they tell me there's a cot that they're pulling out and they're taking shifts, and you've got DCS workers saying that they're calling co-workers saying, will you bring a wash rag? I need to wash this child's face. And trying to do lice treatments at a sink. It just broke my heart. And so I waited a little bit, and then I called Rhonda and I said, our kids not only are going to offices, but they're going to our county jail. And she said, okay. I said, what do we have to do to get one? And so she came and talked to us in May. So that's kind of how I got in this. I just heard her. And I don't know, the idea, I kept talking to our juvenile judge, Judge Anderson, in Grundy County is in big support of this. I kept telling him, I think we need one of these. And in truancy court, I'm there just really trying to connect families with resources. If we see any students I've worked with, then I'm there just trying to help them. But I actually started seeing removals sometimes in truancy court. And so, it's 8:30 at night, and guess what? None of us have had supper. Well, the child that's getting removed, they've not had supper either. And in Altamont, Tennessee, you cannot find hot food when you're pushing after 8:30. So we're having to go out to a little convenience store and getting, a canned item, Chef Boyardee,
Right.
heating that up. And that's not what that child needs. It was 9:30 that night when I left, and that child, they were still working on placement. So that child left with nothing, and the next day I'm having to pull him out of his class to give him school supplies. So we're kind of, reinducing that trauma. And if he'd been at the Isaiah 117 house, the house is stocked. So when he left, it would have been, don't worry about your backpack. We've got a new one. Just come pick that out.
Right.
And so that call with that Isaiah house, it can make such a difference for foster families. And that's one thing we want to do is ease that foster family transition. So instead of that caseworker having to call someone up, say 10:30 or midnight, and say, I've got a sibling group of 3. They all have head lice. They have nothing, and they need to go to school tomorrow. If they've been at the Isaiah house, they can say they've all had lice treatments. They've had their bath, they're in their pajamas, they've had supper, and they have their school supplies. That's a whole different call for a foster family. If they have a young child, they ask them, do you need a booster seat? Do you need a pack and play? And that's one thing that this is bringing awareness to, not only what happens when a child's removed and where they go, but it's also bringing awareness to DCS job, how hard that is. They're supervising children, trying to meet their needs, and place a child. To me, that's impossible. And then we're also realizing we don't have enough foster families. In Grundy County, we had 1. We've now bumped to 3. But there's not enough even in Foster and in Franklin and Coffee. So that's one thing that this is bringing awareness to. We need more foster families so our kids maybe don't have to change schools and leave.
You have talked to a lot of different organizations, I would think, here over the last little bit, since possibly May or something along those lines. We'll talk about, I saw some pictures on their Facebook page. We'll talk about that in a minute. Tell me, with the different organizations you've talked to, Rotary, churches, what have you walked away from all these times that you've been able to share? What have you learned, and what have you heard from folks out there?
I've heard some stories. Sometimes it's surprising. You'll see someone and you can't tell anything by looking at someone, and they'll tell me, I was that child, or I've got a foster child. You know, I'm wanting to adopt, or that's my family. I get that a lot when I go in places to put up flyers, and you'll have to talk with employees and supervisors. They'll say, that could have been my granddaughter. I picked her up from the Department of Children's Services, and she was hungry, and she was dirty, and she was scared. So I'm getting a lot of those stories, and we're getting a lot of support. I'm surprised at the community support we've received. In May, when we had that meeting, I was feeding everyone, because if you provide lunch, you can get people there generally a little bit easier. I couldn't even take all the help that I was given. I had so many people, like we had set aside a small budget to feed everyone. We used nothing from our budget because everyone just kept offering to help. And that's one thing, I've been to churches, there's one that stands out. It was the most unbelievable experience I've ever been part of. When I got up, I spoke longer than I intended, but I felt like I needed to. And the welcome that they gave us, my husband was with me, and when we got done, they took a little break, and they had said some of them wanted shirts, because we also have shirts. It was like something I'd never seen. So much support, and people offering to maybe help frame the house, to help do the foundation, trying to help figure out the septic system, haul gravels. I mean, anything you can think of. We had a notebook, and I was like, here, write these down. But we sold so many shirts and received so many donations that night. I felt like I was at a Black Friday sale. I mean, it was just as fast as we could sling out a shirt, that's what we did. And so it was just amazing, but to see the support and care, and people get it. Even kids. I've been at events where we have this huge banner, and it has kids on it, and it says, defend the cause of the fatherless. And I've had teenagers walk by and ask me what it is. And then when I tell them, the young lady looked over and she said, that was me 2 years ago. And I said, do you mind to share your story? And so she did. And she talked about how long she was at DCS. She talked about friends that had been removed. And then we would have people in their 20s walk by, and they'd say, I was removed so many times I lost count. Wish there'd been a place like that for me. It's heartbreaking to know how much it does happen, and it's not going to get any better with all the drugs and things that are going on. I feel like there's going to be more kids that are going to be removed.
Let's do this. Let's take a quick break. We'll be back and talk more about Isaiah 117 with Susan Johnson right after this.